I'd like to thank the Program for Financial Study for inviting me to talk. I'm going to be talking today about family firms, and this is joint work with Professors Bennetsen, Nielsen, and Perez Gonzalez. This is a paper that I wrote a few years ago, but I think it's very relevant for you guys, so I'm presenting it here. I want to start with one important empirical fact. And this empirical fact is that family firms are extremely common around the world. Okay, so this is a table that lists countries and the fraction of firms that are under family control. Okay, and these are firms that are medium-sized firms, around $500 million in market capitalization. Okay, so just so that you know, so the average across all these countries is 45%. Okay, so 45%, and these are medium-sized and publicly listed firms. You can imagine that smaller firms that are privately held, the percentage of family firms is much, much higher. Okay, so you have, from the low numbers like the US, only 10%, but then you have countries like Argentina with 80%, Mexico 100%, Greece 100%, countries like France and Germany 40, 50%. Okay, so this is just to kind of motivate the fact that family firms are a very, very, very important organizational form around the world. Okay, so that's fact one. The other thing that I want to tell you is one of the most important decisions that these firms take in their lifetime is the succession decision. Okay, so here, the founder, let's say, have to decide whether they want to nominate a member of the family to be the next CEO, or maybe hire a professional manager, somebody that is not related to the family. Okay? And if you ask consultants and academics, they would come up with reasons why a family member might be a better CEO and reasons why they may be worse. Okay, so for example, the first one there under the pros of family CEO, family CEOs, they get higher non-monetary benefits from success. Okay, so not only do you get your bonus if you do well, but you also derive this, satisfaction and pride from having your name in the front door of a very successful firm. Okay? Family members have also grown up with the firm, so they kind of know a lot more about the firm, and for the same reason, they, employees and stakeholders might trust these people more. Okay? So these are kind of on the pros. What are the costs? Well, if you have a family member running the firm, there's going to be some tension between family and business objectives. Okay? So you might be more likely, for example, to cave in and end up hiring other family members for key positions in the firm, okay? And where these people might not be the most talented, okay? So this is more likely with a family CEO. We've heard in the news about, family conflicts that will hamper performance. So we've seen cases where, siblings rivalry gets so bad that it actually affects the firm performance, and that might be a negative of having a family CEO. And perhaps the most important one is the last one, right? We're choosing a family CEO. You are choosing from a very, very small set of people. Okay? Whereas if you go to an outside manager, you have the entire pool of managerial talent. Okay? So, you have pros and cons. And so this is really an empirical question. Okay? So our family, is it a good idea to nominate a family member? Yes or no? Okay? So that's what I'm going to do in this paper. That's actually the only thing that I'm going to show you. I just want to answer yes or no and maybe give you a magnitude. Okay? That's all I'm doing. Okay? So as I said, this is an empirical question, so I need data. So I'll tell you what data that I use for this. So actually, this is data from Denmark. This is the the country where I find enough data to do this analysis. Now I want to do this analysis on a large sample of firms. Okay? So I'm going to luckily for me, Denmark, all limited liability companies submit their financials to the Ministry of Economics. So I have data for all, not only those that are publicly traded, but every single firm. Okay? I have the accounting data for them. They also submit management information, so I know who the managers are, and of course I need this to see when there is a transition, right? I need to know when the manager changed, so I need this management data every year. And most importantly, I also need family data. So I need to know whether the incoming CEO is related by blood or marriage to the outgoing CEO. Okay? So that I can classify this as a family transition. Okay? Again, luckily for me, this Danish Civil Registry provided me with a family tree for each of the outgoing CEOs. Okay? So I'm able to see really whether the outgoing and incoming CEOs are related. Okay? I end up with a sample of around 5,000 family transitions. Okay, that I classify into family transitions and what I'm calling here unrelated. So family transitions are when the two CEOs, the incoming and outgoing, are from the same family. This happened in 1/3 of the cases, and unrelated successions, all the others. Okay, they are not related. So that's my sample. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a preliminary result. Okay, and actually the people who took my class have seen this table before. Okay, so I'm calling it preliminary result because really I'm going to try to argue that even though it seems like a convincing result, you have to be careful with it, and then I'm going to tell you why this is the case. Okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm classifying every succession as a family or unrelated succession, and I'm looking at what happens to performance around the succession. So whether performance declined or increased or stays the same. Okay? And I have a lot of different measures for performance. Let me just pick one. Okay? This is based on operating return on assets. So this is EBIT over total assets. It's a performance measure. And what you can see here, this number that I have here is a change. Okay, so for family transitions, you see that there is a very, very small decline in this profitability measure. Okay, it's not statistically significant. There's a small decline. Unrelated, there is a significant increase. So when an unrelated manager takes over, apparently performance increases. Okay? So and if you do the same analysis for different performance measures, you get a similar result. Let me just say that this is an average result. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that every family transition is a bad transition. It says that on average, once you take all of them into account, the average is kind of worse than the average for unrelated transitions. Now. Where I show you some what I call observable variables, so size and profitability of these firms, classified by the type of transition, family versus non-family. You see that they are very different. Okay, so this is a bunch of characteristics, and you see that you see the stars is that that means that these characteristics are very, very different, statistically speaking. Okay. Of course, if you've taken statistics, you know that you can, maybe in a regression, control for this. Okay. You can, okay, but still there is a bigger worry, which is that there might be things about these firms that I really cannot observe as an academic or as a statistician or econometrician that is driving this difference. Okay, and let me give you one example to have in mind for this discussion. Suppose that what I cannot observe are the firm's prospects. Okay, so maybe there is a firm out there that is about to lose an important client. Okay, I cannot see that in the data. Okay, my data only has financial, and maybe the founder of the firm, knowing that the times that are coming are pretty rough, they are going to be, let's say, unable to hire an outside manager because nobody wants to work for a firm that is going down the tube. So it's only the family members who are actually up to the job, and they're going to take over the firm, right? So this is an explanation. Now, what would I, if this is the explanation, then of course I would see that family firms are doing worse after transition, right? But it's not because the family members are kind of bad managers. It's just simply that they are taking over, and only in cases when things are expected to be chaotic, right? And so I need to solve this problem, right? So I need to somehow measure what is the effect of having a family member that is unrelated to all these potential differences that can arise between family and non-family firms. So that's the goal. All right. So let me tell you what is the typical way in which people solve this problem. Okay. So if so for example, in medical research, people do what is called a randomized control trial. Okay. And let me tell you what would be a randomized control trial in this case. Okay? Of course, this is something that I will not be able to do. But imagine that I just go to I take a bunch of firms, and I approach each firm, and I just flip a coin. Okay? Heads, I tell this firm to nominate a family member. Tails, I tell them to nominate a professional manager. Okay? Of course, this would be completely, it's not possible to do. I would not be able to implement. But if I were able to do this, it would be fantastic, right? Because that would tell me that the group of firms that are doing a family transitions are exactly identical to the group of firms that are doing the other type of transition. Why? Because I'm just picking them randomly. And then I would just compare outcomes. They would be exactly identical except for the fact that one nominated a family members and the other one nominated a professional manager. Right? So that is ideally what I would like to do. Now I cannot do that because nobody will listen to me if I tell them please nominate this because I'm doing this research paper. So what I'm going to do in this paper is I'm going to use something that is very close. Okay? So I'm going to use a family characteristic that is very likely to be random and that is going to create for me that kind of experiment. Okay? And the family characteristic that I'm going to use is the gender of the firstborn child of the CEO, of the outgoing CEO. Okay? And let me tell you a little bit how will that work. Okay? So I'm going to take all the firms that had a family transition and I'm going to classify them not into, a transition, not into family transitions versus non-family transitions, but I'm going to classify them into those firms where the firstborn child is female of the CEO and those where the firstborn child is male. Okay? So what do you expect these firms to look like? Well, they look exactly identical, right? Because gender of the firstborn child is pretty much random. I'm going to show you that they look identical. Okay? So if you look at all the observable characteristics of firms that have a firstborn male versus a firstborn female, this column here, where I used to have a lot of stars for statistical significance, all the stars are gone. Okay? So if you look at size, profitability, the type of industries they're in, these firms are identical. Okay? So whether you have a firstborn boy or girl, it's just it's not going to matter for anything. Okay? Actually, also the type of family, not only the firm, but the type of family is identical. So in terms of the number of kids, the probability of divorce, the probability of remarrying, families are also the same no matter whether they have a firstborn child that is male or female. Okay? So by looking at the gender, I'm just now have two groups of firms, right, that are identical in all possible respects. There is one thing, however, that differs between them. Okay? Actually, if you look at the probability of having a family transition, for some reason, when you have a firstborn child that is male, you are more likely to have a family transition than when you have a firstborn child that is female. Okay? So if you look at this table here, what I show is these are cases where the firstborn child is female. The probability of a family transition is 29%. It goes up to 39% when you have a firstborn child that is male. Okay? So essentially what I've done with gender is essentially I created that experiment that I was telling you about. I created it from this data because now I have two groups. They are identical in every respect. And just because one group got a male firstborn child versus the other one that got a female firstborn child, now one group is having more family transitions than the other. Okay? So I've created that experiment, so now I can cleanly conclude what is the effect of having a family CEO that is not driven by all these differences that I was afraid before that I was causing my result. And actually, when I do that here, I see that the magnitude of the difference is actually even bigger than I predicted before. Okay? So when I look at the data before my preliminary result, I saw that family members do worse than professional managers. When I do this correction to get the result cleaner, I find that the difference is even larger. Okay? And so the story behind is actually not the one that I told you. It's not the one where, I believe, not the one where you know that firm is going to kind of do poorly in the future, and it's only the kids who are actually willing to become CEOs. Actually, the story is more one where if you predict the firm to do well in the future, then these are the cases where you nominate your kid to be the CEO. So maybe the founders have some information about their kids not being as talented as professional managers, and they only leave the firm to their kids when they expect these firms to do well in the future. So when I look at the difference between, just the raw difference between family members and professional managers, this difference is small, but it would be much bigger if they were running the same type of firm, right? So this is what the result is telling me. Now, There are other things that I can do with this, and I don't have the slides for this, but I have a few minutes. I can also tell you, using the same methodology, to see which are the industries, for example, in which family members do better than professional managers, and so, or which are the type of family or firm characteristics that actually lead to better performance by family firms. And those are questions that if you go to the paper, you will be able to find. Okay, so that's